Hello and welcome to the latest installment of PSG Talking. This is our first one of the new year. I'm your host, Ed, and on today's show, we're going to be talking about Paris Saint-Germain's hopefully win over Lens. We're recording this in the final few minutes of the match where PSG have a 1-0 lead over Lens. We're also going to talk about the latest on Kylian Mbappe. We're going to get into some of the January transfer market and some of the players rumored to be heading to PSG. So a great show on deck for you. But first, let's make sure that you all visit psgtalk.com for all your latest Paris Saint-Germain news. We're also on Substack, so head over there. You can read some columns from myself and subscribe for free. And if you enjoy this show and you listen on Apple Podcasts, if you could leave us a review, we'd really much appreciate that. All right, let's get into the show. Joining me today, we have longtime PSG Talk contributor Marc Damon. Marc, thanks for joining the show. How are things on your end?
A nice cold day in New York, but I'm doing all right. Hopefully PSG can see this game out. I think it's been a pretty good performance so far.
Yeah, not a whole lot to be upset about. I mean, down 10 men, Lonzar, you would hope 45 minutes we could get some more goals. I certainly thought there would be more goals, but so that's a little disappointing, but we'll try to update you as we talk. And obviously when you listen to this, you'll know the result, but just so you know, we are recording during this match, but yeah,
a little tough to sometimes score when they're down to 10. It's like, it's sort of a weird psychology when they sort of bunker in a little more, the defensively they're a little more sound, and it takes till later in the game when you can start opening them up a little bit. But
exactly. Yeah, it would be awkward if Lens somehow came back. But as you were just talking, it looks like Kylian Mbappe just scored a really, really fantastic goal there. So PSG should win this up 2-0 with a few minutes left and up a man. So PSG should win this, maintain their lead at the top of the league table.
They go to 8 games. I think they go 8 points up.
Yeah, some of the other top teams in the French league lost, you dropped points, so PSG is certainly capitalizing on that. So that is amazing. Yeah, always good to see that.
8 points with 16 games left, which obviously anything can happen, but that's a solid lead. I mean, you look at it like if PSG just win 10 of the last 16 games, that probably will be enough.
Absolutely. Let's just get into this game here. So, a lot of action here in this first 45 minutes, and then we'll get into the rest of the game. But Lens, they had a penalty. They could have went up 1-0. Donnarumma stands tall. I thought it was a poor penalty, but don't take anything away from Donnarumma. Stood tall, made the save. Didn't allow any of the rebound for Lens to jump on and score. Then you had Bradley Barcola, who I thought might be man of the match, maybe him or Mbappe, but he scored the opener. I thought it was a really great goal assist from Mbappe. Late in the first half, you had Lens went down to 10 men. It was a straight red. It was a tackle on Barcola just on the edge of the box. So just in general, what did you like from this match? Was there anything you didn't like? What sort of stood out to you in this 2-0 win, hopefully?
Well, as always, there's big picture, small picture stuff. We'll start just with this game in particular. I thought that after the first 15 minutes or so, where I think Lens were on the front foot, they were attacking, they were energetic. It's a really strong crowd there, and PSG hadn't won a match at Lens in 3 years, so a tough place to play in a difficult kind of game. But after PSG absorbed the first 15 minutes, I thought they were really pretty in control of this game. I mean, Lens had chances, but they weren't they weren't frequent chances. They'd have one like once every 10 minutes or so, but not enough to where you ever thought PSG were under any kind of intense pressure or anything. So you sort of have to give credit, I think, to the way PSG performed in this match. Solid all the way around. And one thing that we'll talk about, I guess, is they've only made one substitution in this entire game, which in a modern football match with 5 subs, that usually doesn't happen. So it really has been it's been pretty much, I think, only Fabian came on for Soler. Besides that, it's been the same team, and we're at a point where I don't think they're going to make that sub. So
yeah, and I think we can look at the starting lineup as it almost looked like Lens almost scored there. Not only Luis Enrique had to make a couple changes. Hakimi is out for the African Cup of Nations with Morocco. So, he's having to move some things around,
Yeah.
players, fatigue. He's got injury. There could be some players that are potentially moving on in January, which we'll talk about. So maybe you're not
Yeah,
willing to
they,
play
they,
them
they
at the
don't really
moment.
have a they don't really have a right back right now necessarily. So it's they're sort of playing these games without at least they played this game sort of without a traditional set of fullbacks. So that almost makes this more impressive because I think their wing play in this game was exceptional, and and it sort of goes, I think, to where Enrique's head is right now and how he wants to sort of put his squad together. And there's a lot of fascinating things out of that, but the performance of Barcola in particular to sort of give PSG some width going down the outside. Dembele was really good in this game. I don't think he registered. That last assist might have been his on the Mbappe goal. I'm trying to remember, but he looked really good. Barcola looked really good, and they were able to sort of dictate the pace of the game and keep Lens in their own side. The midfield play, Vitinha's good on the ball. Zaire-Emery's great on the ball. So there was a lot of sort of, once you got into that second half, Lens had a little bit of a push, but then it was really all PSG pinned Lens in their own box for long stretches of time. They weren't able to sort of tack on the goals, but they were able to sort of cut off any sort of Lens counters that were really going to be of any effect, and really, really sort of put Lens away, I think, in the sense that they weren't ever going to sustain pressure. And I think when you're playing a team like PSG that's sort of in the sort of groove that they're starting to get in right now, I mean, I think it's 11 in a row without a loss. It's been 8 wins and 3 draws. So when you have a team that's on that kind of streak, it's very hard if you're not sustaining pressure and generating quick chance after chance. So again, really solid performance on the road too. This might be one of the tougher games they play the rest of the way in Ligue 1.
Yeah.
So to get 3 points out of this and to get that 8-point lead in the standings, that's a really, really solid job. And I think you're now seeing an opportunity, especially with the Real Sociedad games about a month away, to start building some momentum.
Sorry about that. I couldn't unmute my mic. I was just going through PSG's recent results. I think you had to go back to November 7th. The last time PSG lost a match, it was at AC Milan, if I'm not mistaken. They've had some draws and such, but really a fantastic run. They began 2024 with the Trophée des Champions win over Toulouse. They crushed the amateur side Revel 9-0. And then here today, 2-0 over Lens. So you have to like the run that they're on. For me, what I liked in this match is just I thought Barcola. For me, we're all very excited about Xavi Simons. We have a lot of really good youngsters, Warren Zaire-Emery. What I like is Barcola is just he's a brilliant footballer. And you see him on the ball. He's like a younger Dembele. He's got all the skill. Now he's scoring goals. I think he is going to be the next version of Dembele 2.0 is what we're going to call Barcola. I just think he's a brilliant footballer, and I think we're getting very excited about some of the other youngsters in this PSG side and the ones coming back from loan. But he's a guy that I think you have to keep your eye on. He really hasn't had any terrible performances. Anytime he's had an opportunity to come on, either starting or as a substitute, he's played really well. He's shown very well, and it's just a brilliant signing coming over from Lyon. What I didn't like is you mentioned the fullback situation. We really don't have a right back with Hakimi on international duty. And so you're having to play Warren Zaire-Emery kind of on that out of position a little bit, I would say. I mean, he can do it, but I wonder, are you stunning his growth a little bit? Could he be better if you moved him more in the midfield, maybe more creative? I don't know, but back in playing on the right fullback side, I don't think is going to be the best thing for him. So hopefully we can make a signing, which is why later we'll talk about. I don't love Mukiele to Bayern Munich. I think that's just foolish if you don't have a replacement. But I don't like that, but overall, what I liked from this match was we got the win. We extended our lead at the top of Ligue 1. We're continuing our run. We're winning. And I have to believe if we keep doing this and we keep playing well, we keep gelling. Again, this is a very new team that was put together, over the summer. I have to believe that we're going to get it together in time for Real Sociedad in the Champions League, and that's really what it all comes down to. We need a good performance there.
Yeah, and what's interesting is that I think over the last few years, under Pochettino and then under Galtier, I think this team got worse sort of in the middle of the season. I think you saw, this is the time where you want to start to see this team come together and feel like a unit that can compete at a high level. And Lens is not even, I don't know, I guess, what would we say Real Sociedad's level is, but I don't think Lens is all that far behind what a Real Sociedad would be. Like, I'd say they were a little behind because they just don't have the players they had last year when they finished second, 1 point behind. But this was kind of a nice little test, I think, especially before the international break. And, I think they passed it pretty well. And I think that fullback situation is interesting. We'll talk about it. But the fact that they do have at least 2 weeks until their next game, and they've only played 4 games, and they're only going to play 4 games in January, and they've already played 3 of them. I think it's a good. It's the way that the AFCON and the Asian Cup sort of fell. PSG won't necessarily miss those players for long stretches, so you'll sort of be able to get away with it. I think, like maybe unlike you would have in years prior, because you need Hakimi in there. He can be a little hot and cold sometimes, but just as a fullback that stretches the field and can track back defensively, he just gives you a whole layer. And add Nuno Mendes to that mix. I think, if PSG aren't going to go out and sign another fullback, they have to be confident that Nuno Mendes is at least going to be back at the beginning of February. So if you can get Hakimi and Mendes back, I think that pretty much solves the fullback issue pretty substantially. And it's also, I think, and I'll sort of get to the big picture here, because with Bradley Barcola, when we talk about the signings that PSG made over the summer, and you have, I think Ramos and Kolo Muani were the more high-profile signings that PSG made, and Kolo Muani was nearly 100 million euros. Gonzalo Ramos, I think, was around 50, 60. I think Barcola was somewhere in the 40s, if I remember right. You could probably look that up, but it felt like Barcola. I always thought that the Barcola signing was a sort of a signing for the future, where it's like, okay, he's going to be on the bench this year. He's going to, maybe get some reps here and there, but mainly he was going to be
45 million from Lyon. Let's see, Kolo Muani was 95 from Frankfurt. Who else was there?
And
Dembele,
Ramos was the
50.
loan that Dembele was sort of a different kind of deal, but of all those attacking signings, I don't think we expected Bradley Barcola to sort of entrench himself in the starting lineup. And it was that game against Newcastle at home where he had 7 high quality scoring chances or some ridiculous number like that, where I think it sort of opened Enrique's eyes a little bit. And look, I think there's a good faith discussion to have of why Gonzalo Ramos and Randall Kolo Muani seem to be bench guys at this point and rotation players as opposed to, critical members of your starting unit. But it's very sort of obvious that Luis Enrique is preferring style of play over sort of the individual ability necessarily. And we've seen this for years where we would have guys who would start no matter how good or bad they played because of the salary that they made. And you basically had a rut you sort of had a Messi, Neymar, Mbappe, Neymar, Di Maria, Mbappe. And no one really ever broke that, nobody ever really broke that trend. Nobody was able to sort of usurp that. And a lot of talent sort of left for that reason. Understandably, because those guys were all really good. But it seems like Luis Enrique has sort of put his foot down, I think, and has said, I'm going to play the guys that I think better fit my style, regardless of the talent, regardless of the money that was spent on them. And for Bradley Barcola to sort of become an everyday starter at 19, when you have Colomwani, who was a World Cup, player, was, in the game in the most critical moments of the, World Cup final, had a chance to win the World Cup final, for a matter of fact. And, Gonzalo Ramos, who in the World Cup was maybe Portugal's best player. He was better than, Ronaldo was. So to see that Enrique is rewarding sort of the on-field quality and not sort of just bowing to, oh, this guy gets paid more or we spent more on him, therefore he has to play. I think that's a breath of fresh air. And yeah, I think we're at a point right now where he's prioritizing his style of play over the names on the back. And I think that's a very foreign idea to a lot of PSG fans who are very not used to this. This is not something that.
Well, I was just going to say that was a question from Zaka on our Discord. Just the lack of integration of Colomwani and Ramos, and I think you laid it out perfectly there. They're not performing, and it doesn't matter what your transfer fee is, what national team you play for. You got to perform in this PSG squad with the tactics that Luis Enrique lays out. And so if you're not doing that, you will be on the bench, and Barcola at 19 years old is going to be playing. And that, like you said, is really a drastic change from what we've seen the past few managers.
Yeah, and it's a part of it too is that right now, Gonzalo Ramos is not a quality player with the ball at his feet. He's not a dribbler. He's a finisher in front of goal. And if he's going to be in the game, he's going to have to finish. You know what I'm like? If your quality is to be a finisher and you're not finishing and you can't really contribute in other ways, that becomes kind of a problem. And I think Colomwani is sort of a victim of not really great with the ball at his feet. Not a classic winger. And I think we'll talk about Mbappe when Mbappe leaves, I think you'll see Colomwani and Ramos be integrated more because I think it'll make more, they'll have a role to play.
Yeah.
The problem is, when you're behind Kylian, it's like you're just not going to get playing time very often.
I put that in my latest piece on Substack where, if Mbappe does move on, we're in good shape. That's why I'm not bothered whether he stays or leaves. If he leaves, we're good. And I think some of these players like Ramos and Colomani could flourish with his absence.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I think they are more nines and they're not really wing guys. And I think Luis Enrique emphasizes the wing play and wants a very specific type of winger in his system. I think he wants a winger that can carry the play, that can sort of, is not so much about making runs off the ball, but being able to carry the ball into the dangerous areas and create high danger chances. And Ousmane Dembele is one of the best players in the world at doing that. Like he is a chance creation monster over on that right wing. And right now, Bradley Barcola is sort of matching that on the left wing. And the chances PSG are creating are from those guys being able to beat their guys one-on-one off the dribble and get into the box. And right now, Colomwani is not a guy that can do that. Ramos is really a pure 9. He's not a winger. So you see some of the guys that he's playing right now. It's, Kang-In Lee on the wing sometimes. And, Marco Asensio, who sort of can play as a false 9 and has, can play well with the ball at his feet. Like that, I don't think it's so much that, he doesn't like these players in the sense that, they're never going to get a chance. I just think with what he's trying to install, it makes sense to have those ball possession wingers who have speed on the outside that can create chances. And
I 100% agree. I do wonder if the Colomwani was that just because he's a friend with Mbappe. And then I also wonder how utterly useless would Harry Kane have been in the system? He can't beat anybody. He's like maybe a better
No,
version of
that wouldn't have.
Ramos.
Yeah, that wouldn't have worked. I think Kolo Muani will eventually be a player that can be useful for this team, especially if Mbappe leaves. I think Kolo Muani can fit right in that 9 role. And then you have, you have sort of an attacking four of Simmons, Barcola, Kolo Muani, and Dembele. That I think makes sense. That could work. But like right now, okay, are you going to sit Mbappe to play? Kylian Mbappe is not like he played 90 minutes against Ravel. Like he ain't going to
So
the bench.
ridiculous.
He's not going to the bench I'm thinking this more and more. This is last year. And he's treating it like it may, maybe backtrack a little bit. He's treating this as if it's his last year. Maybe PSG can convince him otherwise, but I think he's going out there every night. He wants to play the full 90. He wants to carry the team. He wants to set whatever records he can set, and he wants to win a Champions League, and he's going about it that way. And you're getting, full 100% commitment and buy-in from Kylian Mbappe. So right now, I'm not taking him off. Like, I think Enrique understands, look, if I got a year with this guy, I'm going to use him as much as I humanly can. And I'm not worried about rotation. I'm not worried about saving his legs because he might not be on the team next year. So
I may have taken him off after an hour against the 6-tier amateurs. I may have done that, but I see your point.
I just think we're at a point where it's like, I don't think it's kowtowing. I just think it's like, hey, ride the horse till the wheel, hide the, whatever the old saying is, ride the horse till it breaks his leg. Like at this point, because again, what difference does it make? He's not under contract next year.
Well, that's what leads me to my next question. Just overall, we kind of talked about this a little bit, but just with Luis Enrique, what do you think of the job that he's doing so far? He doesn't make as many substitutions as we saw today, and as you just mentioned, he's kind of riding Mbappe every game. But we've got the Trophée des Champions. Yeah. We won that. It's a trophy. We are on an amazing, we haven't dropped any, we haven't lost a game, as I mentioned, since early November. Got through that brutal Champions League group. Is he the best manager PSG has had since Tuchel, since
Ancelotti? Yeah, that's pretty, since Tuchel, obvious. I think he's been clearly the best since Tuchel. Here's the thing, and I think fans, and especially certain types of fans, really enjoy the idea of substitutions and see the there's something about like trying to think with the manager and trying to sort of figure out sort of, okay, where what's he going to do? Why is he doing what he's doing? I don't think this is very complicated to me. I don't think he's somebody that's against the idea of substitution. I think what's happening is when you pick a starting 11 and you believe that starting 11 is the best, group you can put out there to win the game, I think it takes like I think the idea of like, I'm trying to phrase this right. I think the idea of rotating in a game when your tactics are working is something that managers don't really want to do. Like, he put out a starting 11 that he thought was the best 11 he could put out there, and I think for the most part he was proven right. Like, they won the game. And the idea that you're going to then take guys off that you sort of preferred for guys that you didn't prefer, and you're winning the game because of the guy. You know what I'm saying? Like, why mess with something when it's working? And I think that's how most managers sort of look at it. Like, if PSG went up 5-0 or 4-0 with 70 minutes and he's not making subs, maybe then I'm like, that's probably not the wisest decision to make. But when you're only up 1-0 and it's late in the game, and these guys are are playing good defensively, they're not giving up high danger chances. Like, why make the adjustments? And I think Luis Enrique is really doing a solid job of trying to instill a mindset and a style of play, which is something that PSG have lacked for a decade now. An actual sort of style of play. I don't even think the Thomas Tuchel teams had a style of play. I think what he was really good at was game planning for specific games and matchups and being able to, from game to game, try to figure out the best 11 he could put out there to win the game. That's different from developing a style of play that works and that you can use all the time, that you can throw out there and that all of the guys that you have on the roster buy into. That's different. That's something that takes time and it takes patience. And to a certain degree, it takes stubbornness. And I think he's being stubborn in a good way. You're trying to develop something. And to do that, you have to sort of ride with the, 12 to 13 guys that you see as the core of what you're trying to do. And then that in theory, makes other players buy in.
Right. And you never know what players. I mean, Colomwani, you look at his resume, okay, great player. You got to pay the transfer fee, whatever. But you don't really know how he's going to fit into your system until you actually get him in there, in the training, see how he gels with the other team or the other players in the team. So, I could see maybe that being a little bit of a miss. But I think we're on the same page. Colomwani, Ramos, they're going to get better, especially if Mbappe does move on. I think that those players will flourish.
Yeah.
We're going to get into a little bit more with Mbappe in just a second, but just to wrap up PSG and Lens, PSG now with an 8-point lead at the top of the league on table. Nice in second, Brest in third, surprisingly, and Monaco dropped down to fourth. So PSG, if they just keep on, they should wrap this up, the league, and that'll be another trophy for Luis Enrique. That's promising. And then just one other, Kevin Danso is a center back for Lens. He's a player that's been rumored of interest of PSG. In this game, I don't know if you watched him in particular, but I thought he had some really good moments. I really like him. He's a physical player, good speed to him. I don't know if Lens would be prepared to part ways with him, but as we're looking for defensive depth, I was sort of watching him and I thought, he could play. He could play for this PSG side, just like when PSG played Lille. I saw Lenny Yoro, and I was like, yeah, he's a player. He could certainly be in this squad. So just any final thoughts on PSG Lens? Well, Mark, do we still have you?
No,
you might be on mute.
I made the same mistake you did with not unmuting the mic. So no, I think this was a solid win. This was a game that you really needed to. I think, especially going into the break, really was a solid. I keep saying solid a lot, but it's true. It's what it was. Like, this is a team that is starting to figure it out. And the Real Sociedad tie is what I think the next really big thing that's coming up for this team. And that's where we're going to see if all this work, it has paid off so far. So it's exciting. I'm excited. It's a good time, I think.
It's so good to be a PSG fan right now. So many just interesting, entertaining young players. The future is bright. We've got Real Sociedad, you mentioned, on February 14th, but we host Lille before then. We got to go to Strasbourg. I mentioned Brest are in third. We host them on January 28th. So we got some difficult matches before we get to hosting Sociedad on February 14th. Let's transition to a little drama, because there's never a shortage of that when it comes to PSG. I think it was last week. It was journalist Santi Auna reported that Mbappe will join Real Madrid in the summer, and that an agreement between the player and the club had been reached. Of course, this was just like 4 days after Mbappe himself said that a decision hadn't been made, but that all parties are protected in the event that he does leave. But he said he hasn't made a decision. He's focusing on his football. And then after that report came out, there's been other ones saying like, hey, nothing's been decided. No one knows. Like, calm down. What do you make of that report saying that he has agreed? Do you think it's completely made up? It's just for clicks? What is your feeling on the whole situation right now?
Well, I mean, clearly somebody told the Santi, whatever his name is, that I don't know what source he has, but clearly not a source that's too deeply embedded in the Kylian Mbappe camp. Maybe, a friend of a friend of a friend kind of situation. He's not really, to me, one of the top tier guys
No,
when it
I
comes
wouldn't.
to that.
No.
And honestly, when Kylian Mbappe makes his decision, he's going to make a big deal out of it. It's going to be on if he decides to leave, it's going to be, maybe not a press conference, but you'll get a long Instagram post and maybe an article in the Players Tribune or something like that. You'll know. I don't think he's somebody that's going to sort of, if he's really serious of leaving, I think he'll let everyone know and it'll be a goodbye. But this is the thing with this, and I not that I don't care, because he is the best player in PSG history, and he may possibly be the best player in PSG history for a very, very, very long time. So to me, it's like, I think he's, besides not winning the Champions League, which is obviously, you'd rather him have won the Champions League, but he's done everything he can do at this club. And he's been, for the most part, a model employee. He's been a great ambassador for the game in France. He's set all the records. This season he scored 20 league on goals. I think he's going to blow past 30 probably. And, he's done everything he can do, and he's played 7 years. That's a long time. That's sort of like, Ronaldo at Manchester United kind of tenure.
Came 2017, summer of 2017 from Monaco. So he's been here a long time.
It's not like he, left after 2 years and said, screw you guys, I'm going to a better place. Like, he's committed a good chunk of his life in prime of his playing career to Paris Saint-Germain. I can't ask much more of him. Honestly, I can't ask much more from the guy. So
and the fact that he's giving up a loyalty bonus so that, PSG, if he leaves on a free, we may not get a transfer fee for him, but we're going to save, between, I don't know, 70 to 90 million euro. That's not nothing. And so he is helping in that sense. So, give him that too.
Yeah. And I think
he certainly doesn't have to do that.
No, and it was a standoff at the beginning of the year that sort of led to that. And I think at the end of the day, that standoff is, going to be, what it was. And I do think if we're talking, the Mbappe meter, how much confidence do I think he's staying versus leaving? I think it's probably like 70-30 that he's leaving. And I think for a while, I think PSG really feared that possibility. And I think it sort of hampered what they've been able to do, in the long term to sort of set things up. But they're in a much better place than they've been. And if he leaves, I think he should get a hero's send-off. I think the fans shouldn't boo him. I don't think the fans should think any less of him for wanting to do something different after 7 years. And if he could somehow, lead us to a Champions League victory, that cements him as maybe the greatest French player ever. Yeah. And that's saying a lot, but that's, that really leaves his legacy intact there.
Yeah.
So it's not like, to me, like the drama part of this is sort of over to me.
Yeah.
If he goes or he doesn't, it's what it is. And I think he's earned that right. And PSG have set themselves up in a way where they're able to, I think, absorb the hit maybe better than they would have absorbed it. Again, it's hard to replace the best player in the world, but it's possible. You can sort of restructure the way you do things. And it's good that they have a coach that is not sort of reliant on having all these stars to be successful.
Very well said. And I think that we talk about, he came in 2017, just here in the United States, we had some shakeup of things that we didn't think we'd ever see, at least probably not for a while. Tuscaloosa is a long ways from Paris, but Nick Saban stepping down in New England, you had Bill Belichick. These are two of the best coaches leaving the teams that they've been with. So like, change does happen I know that's a weird comparison, but change does happen in sport. Players don't always stay with the same team. Coaches don't always stay with the same team. Players move on. It's just a natural thing. And so I'm with you. I don't know if I put it as high as 70-30 because I would say it's probably 60-40 that he leaves. I think PSG still have a fighter's chance to keep him. I think Mbappe will look around and like what he sees. He's been here for this long. Maybe he will continue to stay and fight. I also think the emergence of Bellingham at Madrid, does he want to go there and sort of play second fiddle to him? I'm not so sure he's going to want to do that. We know about the image rights. You have the Super League junk. I don't know if he's going to want to go there. We know how much Mbappe loves France. He loves his country. He's going to be at the Olympics. We know he's going to be playing with France in the World Cup in 2026. And we got the Euros next year. I just think he's so entrenched with his country, with his national team. And as I've always said in others, winning a Champions League one at PSG means way more than winning the 15th or whatever at Real Madrid. I think that means something to him. So I think if PSG can keep improving, hey, maybe they get to the semifinals, and then with Xavi Simons coming back next season, maybe he does stick around, sign another 2-year deal. Why not? But as I said, as the start this rant, change does happen. If he does move on, I'm not worried about it. We're going to save a little bit of money. We've got some really good young players, Barcola. We've got Xavi Simons, as I mentioned, Kang-In. We're going to be okay as PSG supporters. PSG will still compete for the Champions League. All is not lost. So don't get upset when you see these reports come out. Just know that they don't have any real information. They're trying to generate clicks. They're trying to get people all riled up on social media. They don't really have any information. I'm not so sure that we'll have an answer from Mbappe before the end of the season. I don't know if he'll want to do that. I think he'll want to play and then take his time a couple weeks after the end of the season, like he did last time, and then make his decision and go from there. And the fans want to give him a send-off if they feel a certain way, then I'm sure they will. But I think that's the way Mbappe is going to play this one. Mark, I want to get just kind of sort of tied into this Mbappe story. And it just kind of leads into this back and forth with the football media. I mean, you had the story, what was it, Thursday or Friday, that PSG and the Jordan brand that's owned by Nike, that they were parting ways and that they were going to move to a team maybe in the Premier League. And then a report like an hour later comes out and is like, yeah, there's been no talk. The partnership is great. They're not leaving. They may add a Premier League team, but no one's parting ways in between Jordan and PSG. Just any thoughts in general of this like foolishness from the football media right now?
Well, before we go into that, just a little quick correction. PSG is going to play in the Coupe de France on Saturday. So I thought there would be an international break. There is currently no international break that week. They're going to play U.S. Orleans in the round of 32. So
is it Orleans or Orleans?
Orleans, New Orleans. Yeah, Orleans probably. That's probably
I know
the
in
French
New Orleans, you don't say New Orleans or else you'll get kicked out. Don't say New Orleans in Louisiana. Anyway, go ahead. What were you saying?
Well, okay, but just to make that correction. Anywho, football media, some clowns. I think that's the best way to describe it. They're very clownish, and it's not about accuracy. It's about clicks and engagement. That's what it's always been about. So it's like, again,
it's especially bad with PSG, I feel like, because there's no one. I guess there's not a big English-speaking fan base. I mean, I've been doing this for a long time. I have an understanding of how big the English-speaking fan base for PSG is, and I feel like they can get away with it because there's not a big blowback.
I actually think the larger problem in that regard is that I think in England and in Spain and in Germany and in Italy, the media, the actual in-country media is way more, the relationship is more cozy, and you have outlets that are basically intentionally positive towards the side. They sort of pick which team they want to, basically cover and cheer for, and they basically act as press agents for those clubs. So anytime there needs to be news that breaks, anytime they need to destabilize another club, they can easily just call a reporter at those news sites and they can basically just do whatever they want. I think historically in France, the French media is way more adversarial. So I don't know if PSG necessarily has allies in the media necessarily. in France. So I just think a lot of the times there just isn't that that outlet that you go to sort of that has the PSG slant to it. But also just from the English side, I think PSG is just an easy punching bag, honestly. Like you need villains.
It's so true.
And they just need a villain to currently watching the playoff game. Like, it's Green Bay and Dallas. And Dallas is, the most overhyped, covered team in the United States of America.
Just as a disclaimer, Marc Damon is a New York Giants fan.
No, I think there's a lot of people that would agree with me on this. I'm pretty sure this is not a controversial opinion. That basically the Dallas Cowboys are covered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Like, that's not me as a Giants fan. That's just me as a football fan going, here's a team that hasn't won anything since the Bill Clinton administration, and they get more coverage than every other team in the sport combined.
They are America's team. Yeah. I also love that in this we've mentioned Nick Saban, Bill Belichick, and the Dallas Cowboys.
We're just losing everybody here. We're slowly running people off with our American football references, which is exactly what people who want to listen to a PSG podcast come for.
Well, I want to get into this next topic because it's something I've been tweeting about a lot. It's about the January transfer window. There's really not a whole lot of big names being rumored right now. Newcastle's Bruno Guimaraes, hopefully I pronounced that correctly, felt like a possibility for like 3 days, and then fell off. I think the price tag's going to be too high. But the rumor I want to get your thoughts on, and I'll start with it, is Nordi Mukiele to Bayern Munich. This is one that's been picking up steam. Fabrizio's kind of like winking and saying like, here we come, is almost ready. And I'm just like, why are we even answering the phone when Bayern Munich calls? They are a potential matchup in the Champions League. I don't think we should be strengthening them whatsoever. I also think that we need Mukiele for depth. He's a very versatile player. We don't have a lot of depth in our back line right now. I think getting rid of him hurts us and strengthens a potential competitor. I don't know why you do this deal unless you have a player lined up that you think is better that you can 100% sign in January. That's my thoughts on that. What is your take on Mukiele to Bayern potentially?
I don't think I've heard necessarily that. The only thing I've heard from the PSG side of this, which is really the only side that matters, is that PSG would be willing to let him go if they could get a replacement. Like, Mukiele can agree to personal terms all he wants. Like, it doesn't really matter.
Ekatike can tell you about that. You can agree all you want.
Yeah, you can agree to whatever personal terms you want, whatever imaginary fake contract you want to apply for, Like, PSG have to make... There doesn't seem to be necessarily an urgency on PSG side to, like, get rid of him. This more feels like a guy who's not getting playing time at PSG and wants to try to go somewhere else to get playing time. And that's understandable. Like, Mukiele sees himself as a starter. He sees himself as a guy who can be on a starting 11. I don't know what's, is he making Bayern Munich's starting 11? Like, am I missing something here? Like,
from what I can see, their fans are really wanting Mukiele. They're excited about it, so they must have a need. I don't follow Bayern too closely. I think the other thing is they want it to be a loan, just a loan. But I think the hang-up is maybe PSG wants to include some sort of obligation to buy, which Bayern's a little. Yeah, well,
if I'm PSG, like, and I heard the rumor that they would want, somebody like a Joshua Kimmich in going the other way, but like,
yeah, that's not going to happen.
To me, this is one of those where it's like, I don't believe necessarily that PSG's really there's an urgency at all here. Honestly, like, there just does not seem to be an urgency for PSG to make this move. It just seems more like Mukiele and Bayern are trying to get something going. Like, I'm pretty sure they'll probably send him out in the summer, to be honest, but I don't know if necessarily it's going to happen in the winter, especially if they don't have the depth to replace him. I don't think they're that stupid to just let a guy go and not get a replacement. So I wouldn't worry too much about that. I think this management group is more competent. Luis Campos is far more competent than anyone they've had in that role. You can agree or disagree with some of the decisions he's made, but he's absolutely a competent person. Like, so, like, I wouldn't worry too much about this. I think with Mukiele, like he's not going to be a starting fullback for them when Hakimi and Mendes are healthy. And right now, their center back situation's a little murky, but he seems to be behind guys like Danilo and Lucas Beraldo and Lucas Hernandez and Marquinhos. So, there really isn't a place for him, I think, in the squad long term. So I understand why he'd want to leave. So,
Yeah,
let's
you're under contract.
let's see if there's more traction on this, because I again, Bayern can agree to whatever personal terms with the player they want. PSG have to sell him.
Mm-hmm.
It's a two-way. There's no release clause here, so it's not like they can just buy him.
Yeah. There's been rumors, Galatasaray's Sacha Bowie, I believe, he's a right back, France international. Contract expires
Well,
in
that was a
2020.
funny one, because there was a report out of Turkey that's like, he's agreed to personal terms and he's ready to leave now. And then like a report an hour later was like, no, that's not happening.
I think Galatasaray would probably want a significant transfer fee, but he would. I think he'd be a great signing.
Oh, I think they're going to do. I do think they're going to get another. Well, the Moscardo signing still has to happen. He's getting the foot surgery, so I'm assuming that's going to happen at some point, and then they're going to need to sign probably a backup fullback somewhere along the line. So we still half the month left. So I still think they'll maybe it won't be a big flashy signing, but they definitely need someone for depth purposes. So I would say, whoever that would ever happen to be, like, it's not going to be sort of a big impact. There's not going to be a big impact player coming into the squad in January. That's not going to happen, because they don't really have the finances at the moment to do it. And B, I don't think you necessarily need to do that. I think they need to, fill out their depth a little bit, maybe. Obviously, we're short on fullbacks. But, I don't see a need to sort of shake up the roster.
I tend to agree with you. I also wonder, we always tout PSG's academy. I think that the fullback position is certainly something that those leading the academy and the young players, we need to start identifying players that we could bring up, because fullback is a very difficult position to find in the transfer market, and it's a very expensive one. And so I think if we can start to kind of homegrown.
But this is the thing. PSG have their two fullbacks. This is not a situation where PSG are in a spot where they don't have fullbacks. They have two of the best fullbacks in the world.
Well, one's injured and one's on international duty, so we need a little depth.
You need depth. And you can find guys with depth. Like, it's not necessary to we need a fullback so desperately and so badly. It's like, no, PSG have the fullbacks. They just need to get them healthy.
I'm with you. Let's get to a couple questions here. We've got some really good ones. PSG Talk contributor, we've had him on a few times, James at its_JCJ. So he wanted to know Barcola. We already did that. He wants to get some Donnarumma thoughts. And then he and one of my favorite Twitter handles, at Nude Smellingham, they're wondering about Danilo. Should he be a regular starter? So let's start with Danilo. Regular starter for you. Any thoughts on his performance today?
I think in a perfect world, he's not a regular starter, but I think he's good in certain games. Like, he can be, he's to me like a perfect rotational,
yes,
he's going to start if PSG played, 45 games a year, he's going to start 15 to 20 of them, something like that, and then be a rotational guy otherwise. I don't see him, if he's playing 40 plus games for you, that's probably not good. But if he's sort of selectively playing in the right kind of games against the right kind of teams, that can work. That to me is a good guy to have as a squad rotational player.
Agreed. I don't think I want him to be a regular starter, but he is so good off the bench. And if there's an injury or a suspension and you're okay, we got to put Danilo at center back or put him at defensive midfielder, you're not really worried too much. He's performed at a level that you're not concerned if he has to come in. You don't think PSG loses a whole lot, but he also doesn't have that like big upside to him. He's not going to drastically change the game. You may not even notice him on the pitch, which is to his testament. He goes out there, he does a job. I think he's great. I don't want to see him leave, but I also don't know if I want to see him as a regular starter. So I thought,
no, like there's guys that are like 15 to 20 game players a year, and I think that's what Danilo is. Like if he had to play every week at center back and against teams with really good mobile front threes, like you saw it in that game today, it was kind of a soft penalty, but he's not somebody that's fast. He's not someone that can track necessarily. He's a good guy to have when you're sort of bunkering in and need a body that can, make a play and break up a pass and stuff. Like that to me is his strength. And he's, a pretty decent ball mover. He's not like an all-world level ball mover, but he can do enough. But like the way PSG are going with their youth, it's like a kid like Lucas Beraldo. I want to see a lot. I want to see more of him.
Yeah,
like I didn't get seeing him play against Revel wasn't really. It didn't really say much because that game was completely meaningless. But like, I really want to see Beraldo get some minutes in because he seems like he can move. It seems like he's a good passer. And Marquinhos is clearly, still a good center back, but he's lost a step. He has a lot of mileage on the tires. So, like, do I really want Danilo to play a lot of those minutes, or you got to have to think of how you want to look the squad to look going forward. To go into Donnarumma, this is sort of the classic point, and I think I've brought this up on the show before. I'm pretty sure I have. It's like he's not as terrible with the ball at his feet as everyone thinks he is. He's had some high-profile mistakes for sure, but it's not like the guy's a baby deer on ice skates out there. He's, he can be functional, not exceptional, but functional. And just my opinion, I think the point of a goalie is to stop the ball at the line. I don't think the point of the goalie is to, be this amazing ball mover. Like if I had to choose between the two, I'd rather a guy that can make stops. And you sort of see it at Manchester United where David De Gea was great for all those years, and they were like, oh, well, we need a guy that can move the ball. And so we need a guy that can play with the ball at his feet. So we'll get rid of him. We'll bring in Onana, and Onana's been pretty awful, honestly. Like that to me is like you really have to be careful when you have a goalie who can stop the ball at a just elite level. And there were some saves in that first half where, they weren't all world saves, but they were comfortable saves. And they were moderately difficult saves that he made look more comfortable. And sort of the skill, even on that penalty where it was not a great penalty, but he read it well. He didn't dive one way or the other. And the fact that he was able to sort of get down on, like drop to his two knees, like deflect the ball out and then get back on his feet and was able to sort of like there was definitely, there's a real skill that he has that isn't something that you just find off the street. Like to be an elite ball stopper at the line and to make those kinds of reaction saves is a difficult job for a goalie. And I'm not like all that anxious to get rid of a guy like that for a guy who may be great with the ball at his feet, can make some pretty passes, but is not going to make that big save when you need him to make it. And that's the thing. Donnarumma's been clutch. Like he makes clutch big time saves with pressure. That's not an easy thing to find. Those guys do not just grow on trees. It is an absolute rare thing to have. You can count them on one hand, the amount of goalies that are as good as Donnarumma is at stopping the ball. And to get rid of that guy, you really have to have a goalie that has all of the intangibles and all the tools. And the guys that have had those over the years, I mean, okay, Keylor Navas was very good, but I would not say that he was an elite ball stopper in his prime, because I do think obviously he was playing for super elite teams that sort of, I never thought, as great as he was, I never thought, oh, Real Madrid won all those Champions Leagues because of Keylor Navas. Like, that was not anything that was ever said by anyone ever. But okay, let's look at the guys we're talking about. Prime Buffon, which is, I think, the closest comp to what Donnarumma could end up eventually being. So you're telling me your plan, if you're the GM of Paris Saint-Germain, you're the sporting director, your plan is to get rid of a guy who's 25? He's not even 25. Give me what his age is. He's not even 25, I don't think. And has the chance to possibly be the next Gianluigi Buffon, who's one of the
24.
best goalies. Yeah.
24.
Who can eventually be the next Gianluigi Buffon, to get what? To sign who? Just because he can play the ball at his feet, a guy that can play the ball at his feet better, but is an inferior shot stopper. The only guy where I'm like, okay, who's the best goalie of this generation? In my opinion, it would be Manuel Neuer. Because Neuer can do. Neuer is one of the few guys in the history of the sport that can, maybe like that Russian goalie from the 50s, maybe the one they named the goalie award after. But maybe him. But like, the guy you're looking at, the sort of has it all, is Manuel Neuer. How many Manuel Neuers do you know?
Well, and that's what my point was. Like, what's the opposite of like the golden generation or whatever? Whatever the opposite of that is kind of what we're in now. How many teams have what you would say is a world-class goalkeeper that they love and doesn't make any mistakes, like a Manuel Neuer? Like, there's just not that many. I'm just kind of looking. I think I'm with you. I agree with you. I don't love Donnarumma, again, with the ball at his feet. It's not great, but I also think a little bit mentally he could be a little weak at times. We see him get shoved off the ball by Benzema against Real Madrid. So I think he could be a little tougher, a little mentally strong. If he were going to leave, I would only say let him go if you can get a Mike Maignan, just because he was at PSG, and I like players coming back who are very high quality, who kind of have the club in their heart. If we could get him to come back, sure.
I don't mind Mike Maignan, but Mike Maignan is not the shot stopper that Donnarumma is. He's just not.
Yeah,
he's not. He's not. And this is the point. Like, you can't. I'm very reluctant. For a lot of years, PSG had very crappy goaltending. And they finally got Navas, who was the best goalie they've had probably since like the 90s. Since I know the guy's name is just escaping me at the moment, but probably since the 90s. And then they finally get a guy like Donnarumma, who's flawed, but I don't want to play goalie.
We don't have Kevin Trapp. We don't want Kevin Trapp.
Yeah, we were playing with Alphonse Areola and Kevin Trapp, and Salvatore Sirigu. Like, I'm sorry, these are not all-world goalkeepers. These are replacement level guys, just guys you can find on the street. And I don't want to be in a situation where I'm playing, where my goalie is just a guy on the street. So, that's what I would say to that.
All great. And I think, just going back to Danilo, James was just wondering about his thoughts, especially like when joining the attack. I don't know if he joins the attack too much. He could be a nice kind of,
That's
transition point.
I think he's a solid ball mover.
Yeah, he can push the ball into the attack. I also think, we sort of vertically challenge. I think if he can get into the box on set pieces where we are woefully poor, I think any height in the box where we can get a header potentially would help. So I think he can certainly help
the flaw of the flaw of the team is that they are very bad at the one thing you lose when you lose Neymar and Messi is you become a far worse set piece team. Corners and free kicks.
Yeah, we're so bad.
Like that's but you know what? But that was to be expected. Again, if you're going to get rid of those guys, you absolutely have to, assume that you're going to get worse.
Yeah. And
And
then James also, he had a great question, and I'm going to read it exactly. He said, Soler and Ruiz? Question mark. That's the
well,
question.
okay, not to. I don't want to spend 3 hours on Soler and Fabian Ruiz,
Please
but
don't. Please don't.
okay. But here's the thing. They play. They're Spanish, which means they fundamentally, just by being Spanish and being on the Spanish national team and playing for Luis Enrique in some form or fashion, have a fundamental idea of how to play that style.
Right.
So, are they as talented as some of the guys they could be playing? Yeah, probably. But fundamentally, they understand what Luis Enrique wants. Therefore, especially at the beginning, this is like, I'm going to make another football reference.
Yes.
Like, this would be like, obviously Aaron Rodgers tore his Achilles, so he never ended up playing. But this is like when Aaron Rodgers goes to the Jets and they sign Randall Cobb and all these other Green Bay guys. They're not signing those guys because they're like the best players they could find. Those guys are playing because they know the system that's being played and they know how to run the proper routes and they know how
I gotcha. That makes
they
sense.
they know the chemistry of the system they're trying to run. Yeah. So to me, like that's exactly why that's exactly why those two guys are playing. They're playing for that reason. So they always have either Soler or Fabian Ruiz in the game.
Mm-hmm.
And, if those two guys aren't in the game, then Marco Asensio's in the game. Because you need one guy on the field that knows what Enrique wants and can communicate it to the other players. So that's what that's all about, for the record.
And they are good passers of the ball. They're technically pretty good. I just they don't have mind-blowing
They're not explosive
speed.
players. They're not
explosive.
They're not the best player you could put there. But again, you don't always want the best player. You with the most talent, you sometimes want guys who are good for the system that you're playing.
Yeah. And if they're not a headache in the locker room,
yeah,
if, they're not crazy expensive wages. They're good players to have in the squad. I know we don't love them, but we don't need to love them. It's sort of like Danilo. These are good guys to have on the bench. They have good quality. They bring something to the team.
Yeah.
Maybe they're not going to be here long term, but we'll see.
Most importantly, they understand the system.
Yeah, exactly.
That's really what it is. They can be great guys and all that. They understand the system that is being played. That's the main reason they are there.
Yeah. Well, so far, so good in 2024 for PSG. Thanks for everyone who sent in a question. Really appreciate it. If we didn't get to yours, we'll do it again. We'll do a little mailbag. You can send in your questions. Mark, any final thoughts before we let you run here?
No, I'm watching this football game and I got this sort of weird smile on my face for some reason. I can't necessarily tell you why, but I don't want to get ahead of ourselves. But this is this could be a very
nice when you can see a Real Madrid, the Dallas Cowboys, New York Yankees, any of these teams lose. It's always a good thing.
Hey, watch the Yankees. Yankees haven't won in a while. They're due.
That's fair. Yeah, well, they can maybe real quick on that Real Madrid Barcelona. I saw you tweet. I had no idea that was on. Do they ever release the ratings for this? They had it on the main ABC channel. Who was watching that? I had no idea.
I actually think it's gonna draw because I think that if although honestly the Spanish speaking audience is probably gonna watch it on like Telemundo or Univision or something.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like that's the thing. I don't know if that's going to rate very well.
There was no appeal for the average fan. PSG has Mbappe. Everyone knows Mbappe. Yeah. If you had
Miami, what we need to talk about at some point. And I don't know if we're running over time here. We really do have to talk about the TV rights because I think that's a big the Ligue on TV rights. I think that's a really big deal.
Mm-hmm.
Very important to get into at some point.
Let's save that for another topic because I do love that. There was a little bit of information, but maybe we'll let it simmer, see if anything else comes out because next season we do need a new deal with somebody and who knows who it's going to be.
Yeah.
So we need to get into that for sure. We'll save that for another show. But
agreed.
Anyway, Marc Damon, you can follow him at MarcDamon9. I'm at PSG Talk. Give me a follow. Check us out. We're all over the web. Just click on our link in our bio. You'll find us. Anyway, thanks for listening. Until next time, bye for now.
Wait a minute. That's my line. Let's try it again.
All right.
No, we're keeping all this in.
Okay. All right. And that was Marc Damon. You can follow him at MarcDamon9. Of course, I'm at PSG Talk. We're all over the place. Just click our link in our bio. You'll find us. All right. Until next time.
Au revoir for now.